There it is. Good morning and welcome, welcome, welcome here in the sanctuary, there on the holy interwebs. Wherever you are, I'm glad that you are choosing to spend this time with us. I'm Reverend G, in case you don't know yet. Now you do. And I am so grateful for every single one of you. I'll have to tell you, so I am, when I was young, I listened to a lot of music, and somehow I got out of the habit. And then I started listening to NPR, and then books on tapes, and then I stopped listening to music. And then I was speaking at a church one Sunday, and the musician played the song Fix You. And I remember how much that touched me then, and it did now too. Thank you for choosing it. It was my first time hearing it, even though back then it was already a well-known song or well-worn song, but it was my first time hearing it. Anyway, I grew up in a family, so my parents don't have higher education. And growing up, higher education was a thing that was not an option not to have for us children. So from day one, since we were that little, it was like beaten into us that no matter what, we're going to go to college, we're going to get that degree, and then study, 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 and learn, 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 because that's the secret to life. That's the key to good living. So, you know, I got educated, and so did my siblings in math and geography and history and you name it. And then, of course, I went to college, and my sisters did too. And like I said, it was not an option not to go. As if going to college is truly the secret to wisdom. It's the secret to emotional intelligence and to just overall well-balanced, good living. College is the key. And I can see why my parents would have thought that, because that's the thing they didn't have, you know? So then college becomes the goal. You know, it's like for a hungry person, bread is God. So it's bread that you, and then you get the bread, and then a million other problems arise. And our society, the Western society, is so strongly geared towards knowledge of the head, the intellectual knowledge of the sciences, of that's what's really elevated, and it is highly regarded. When you have a PhD, my goodness. You know, when you meet somebody, what do? That's the first question, isn't it? And then if you have that kind of pedigree, then people are just so delighted to see you. And if you don't, then you're the one standing awkwardly in the corner by yourself. It's how we judge people. And one can say it's superficial, and it's still rather true. We are snobs in some ways in this society, right? And we can be snobs of many different things. We can be snobs of clothing. And then if you say that my pants are from, I don't know, Old Navy or the Gap, then it's ruined. You're done. It's like, no, you're no good. Or we can be snobs of careers. What is your career? Or what church you go to? And then you say a particular one, and if that's not on your list, then we're done with you. We judge each other by a tiny sliver of information that the other person gives us, and then we make it as though that whole person is just that tiny sliver of thing, those pants from the Gap or the Old Navy. So that's the lay of the land. But educating us and getting all that education, has it made us significantly happier? I mean, I'm asking really, have you found that college degree is the one that just catapulted you into ecstasy and catapulted you into enlightenment, and life is all sorted out. The moment you got that diploma, it's all been just nice since, like easygoing, because you got it now. Have you noticed that that's the truth? Or then maybe your expectation was that once you find that person, I mean the soulmate, the one out there. There's 8 billion people, there's one for you, only one that you are a perfect match with. And then when you found them, the one who you expect to read your mind, and then if they don't, that's just not your soulmate. Because we no longer believe in language, do we? Like, we don't have to use language. If I have to tell you what I need, what good are you? If I have to tell you why I feel the way I feel, then what good are you? You should read my mind. But then, is that really a good recipe? Like, if that's what we base a relationship on, like, okay, so when do we show up for the airport? You know the information, I have to read your mind. Does it really work? If I have to read your mind, can we make it in time? So, have you found that once you found that soulmate, once you got married, that it's just become all wonderful, like no more issues? It's right. So, or or the job, the perfect job. We're all seeking the perfect job, the perfect employment. And then, so those of you, some of you are retired, some of you are still working. Have you found that you were perfectly happy in your job, or that you are perfectly happy in your job right now? Is that, after all, you studied for this, you prepared all your life for this job, yes? You went to courses, you took 1 million courses, and then you have certificates, and then you have all kinds of pedigree that prepared you for this particular career. How happy are you? And if you're very happy, good for you. And if you're not that happy, then you need to consider, and maybe that's why you're here today, because there are no accidents, are there? You need to consider that you need to work on emotional intelligence. Because that is the one thing that, for whatever peculiar reason, we neither have nor do we teach very well to our offsprings. And I find that very peculiar. Because, say, statistics say that people who live in very good relationships, communication is good, there's vulnerability, there's intimacy. That's what people report that is the source of their happiness. Okay, it's not the work, even if it's fulfilling. It's being in a fulfilling relationship that is the source of their happiness. Now, if you were to tell that, if a Martian would come here on Earth, and then they would learn, human beings, the source of their happiness and fulfillment comes from the quality of their relationships, then they would think probably that these people surely invest at least 60 to 80 to 90% of their lives bettering themselves and their relationships. Surely they are so invested in figuring out emotions and healthy relating. And that is just not even the case, is it? Like, if you go to a school, how much of the curriculum is dedicated to emotional intelligence? Any level school, unless you take a course in emotional intelligence. But, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, 12th grade, how much of that curriculum is dedicated to emotional intelligence? It's the thing that would be the basis of our actual happiness and fulfillment. Zero. Peculiar. The Martian would say, like, what's wrong with these people? Like, why don't they, like they report that is what makes them happy, and that is the one thing they don't do. Instead, they go and do the sciences and the this and the that. Now, let me tell you how cuckoo we are. So, what is the best way to make a friend? Now think about it. You meet with somebody for the first time. Hi, I'm G. Hi, I'm Regina. Let's start and figure each other out. We want to connect. It would be nice to make a new friend. So what's the first thing I say? I'm wonderful. Regina says, I'm wonderful too. Life is good. Job is good. Kids are doing fine. It's unbearable. It's insufferable, right? Because it's not true. Because the reality is that the one thing we surely have in common, that in some way or another we suffer. That's what the Buddha said. That's what life is. There's suffering. It's the one thing we have in common. The best way for Regina and I to connect and make a real connection is to tell each other how broken we are in what ways. This is how my brokenness shows up. It's vulnerability. It's making myself vulnerable. Like I'm going to show you. Yeah, there are things in my life that look good, especially if you look at my Facebook pictures. I always smile. But then there are these bits in my life. I don't know how to fit the pieces. It's like I really struggle over here. And then Regina says, guess what? So do I. And I figured out that piece, but for me, this piece fell apart. And now we connect. It's like, wow, how can we walk together on this path and like help each other? It's like elevate a little bit each other. But instead, we're so crazy that when two strangers meet, we try to impress each other with our successes that are, by the way, to some degree might be true, but to a great degree it's loony-toony, right? How crazy is that? And then we wonder, oh, why don't we have intimacy? Why are we not having true connection? Why our connection is not fulfilling? They're not really enriching us. Well, that's why. Because we're afraid to make ourselves vulnerable. Because weak people are vulnerable, we think. And in fact, that is not true. A weak person would never dare to make themselves vulnerable. It takes courage to be vulnerable. So, what did Socrates say? He said, know thyself. And you know that this is important because otherwise, and that it's difficult because otherwise he wouldn't have said it. Know thyself. And then he even took it a step further and said, a life unexamined is not worth living. I think it's harsh. I think it's a little bit harsh. But, he lived so long ago, we give him a pass. But know thyself. Why would anyone have to say, know thyself? Shouldn't that be like a given? Shouldn't that just go without saying? Wouldn't the Martian think when they come here that these people know themselves? I mean, they live with themselves. They're with themselves 24/7. They dress themselves, they feed themselves, they clean themselves. They must know themselves. Turns out, not true at all. And in fact, we spend so much time trying not to know ourselves that it's ridiculous. Ways? Well, we distract ourselves. The way I imagine our inner beingness, it's like a huge mansion. And there are like many, many doors. And they are shut, sealed, usually by fear, right? Or sealed shut? Which one? Wait, sealed shut. They're sealed shut, usually by fear. And then we sit in the attic, in a dark room, with a little flashlight. And every now and then we turn it on and look a little bit scary, turn it back off. That's how I envision ourselves. And why is that? Well, think about it. The way we have evolved, right? All the five senses, all of them are directed outward. Yes? I smell what's out there. I hear what's out there. Now imagine if your hearing was directed inward. You would be deafened by these highways of blood rushing through your body, right? Like we are so not directed inward that even if our tummy gurgles, then we say, did you hear that? Like that's a surprise that somebody heard that, right? So all our senses, the 5 senses, are directed outward. I feel out here. What's out here? I don't feel it in there. That's why I don't know that there's like a tumor growing inside me, because I have no knowledge of my inner self. So to know myself, my inner self, that requires a different know-how. It's something that my body is not naturally built for, right? With my senses directed outward. So then it requires something that, well, might make me uncomfortable. That might make me, it might be awkward at first. Like I just sit with my thoughts. Can you imagine anything scarier than that? Like any thought? Like, do you know what pops up in here? It's crazy. Sitting with those thoughts, it can be scary, sometimes funny, but many times uncomfortable, because there are things I tell myself I don't like to hear. I tell myself that I'm not good enough. Who likes to hear that? I tell myself that I'm a fraud. Well, does that feel good? Who wants to hear that? Who wants to sit with that? But if I don't sit with that, if I push it away, yes? If I don't allow it, if I don't look at it, and maybe even examine it, is it true? Is it true that I'm a fraud? Is it true that I'm... Look, there's the way the society is built. Let me tell you about it, okay? The Western society, especially, we're so individualistic, yes? So it's the self. Well, in this culture, how many times do you hear self-made? Yeah, self-made. It's the self-made person. And in this culture, we introduced meritocracy. So meritocracy goes like this. It doesn't matter who your family was, what kind of conditions you grew up in. You earned what you got. If you have a great fortune, a lot of money, a lot of success, you merited, you earned it. And that sounds good, right? It sounds like it's a can-do society. So basically, if I put myself to it, if I apply myself to it, I too can be successful. I too can be president. Not me, because I wasn't born in this country, but you can be president. The sting in the tail is that it also then implies that the ones who didn't make it also earned it. They deserve it. So if you're not doing well, if you failed at something, you deserve it. Failure is looked upon as you're a loser then. And back in earlier times, like in the Roman times, the beauty was that if you were successful, they would say you're fortunate. And then you would go to the goddess of fortune and you would present a gift to thank the goddess of fortune for helping you with this great success of whatever that is. Relationship, money, I don't know, whatever it is, health, whatever it is. You go to the goddess of fortune. And then, because she blessed you, you're fortunate. And the goddess of fortune was weird because her eyes were closed, were covered, right? So she would just hand out fortune kind of willy-nilly to whomever. So if you got it, you were like really fortunate because, you know, not everybody gets it. So now think about that society versus this one. If you got fortune, you earned it. If you don't, you're not unfortunate anymore. You're a loser in this society. And that's what you have to live with. I'm a loser. If you have fortune, it's not because luck would have it. It's not because circumstances just played out so in your life that this came to you. No, you created it. You absolutely created it. And if it doesn't happen, you're a loser. You feel that? There's a sociologist, and I don't remember his name. That's my problem always. I forget to write it down, then I forget to mention it. But sociologist who studied the agricultural society, what do you call that? Agrarian, thank you. The agrarian societies, as well as the modern society. So we live in this modern society. In the agrarian society, families and communities were very close-knit, and they needed each other because they had to work the fields together. If they didn't work together, there was no food. So the communities were very, very tight-knit. Now, in the modern society, the individual, a great prize is placed on the individual, or we live in these dyads, like people get married and then the two of them live together. And then we create a life in this modern society kind of isolated from each other as either individuals or dyads or maybe just a small family. Now, the interesting thing that he found was that in the modern society, the individual is 20 times more likely to commit suicide than in the agrarian society. So we think we fixed our problems. We think we have improved life over what it had been back there. And in fact, the reality is that we made it worse. We made it worse because we have given up on relationships. We have given up on communities that sustain us. We have not tapped, or we are not tapping into resources that we can offer to one another. And that is huge. So, you know, I'm not a religious person. So that is not, today at least, it's not why I'm a minister. But I am definitely a big believer in community. Because it has been my sustenance so many times in life. So today, I am talking about resilience and inner strength. It is very important that we are introspective, that we know ourselves. And for that, we must do whatever it takes. We cannot count on the school system to offer it to us. So here's Eric. He offers mindfulness programs, which I recommend. In our community, there's Darby, who offers emotional intelligence courses and programs, workshops, which I very warmly recommend. But there in the world out there, there's so many ways in which you can learn to know yourselves. And it takes courage to sit with your thoughts, because like I said, our thoughts are just not always kind. In fact, if you're anything like I am, they're a bit scary and harsh and unkind. If I were to you as I am to myself, you'd be hurting a lot. And maybe that's true for you too. So how do we then develop compassion, kindness, love, forgiveness? It's by sitting with these thoughts. How do you sleep? Do you sleep well? I think sometimes the reason we're up at night is because all the thoughts that we forget to think during the day, that we distract ourselves from, they come rushing in at 3 a.m. And then they keep us up, and then there's nowhere to go. And it would be so nice. In Hungarian, we have a saying that you can't You shouldn't start feeding a horse only underneath the big mountain. You have to feed the horse throughout, because once you reach the reason you would feed a horse under the mountain, because you want them to be able to climb the big mountain and maybe pull the load. But if you starve that horse all the way to the mountain, it's not enough to just feed it there. So it has to be a lifetime of dedication of knowing yourself, knowing myself. Now, inner strength. Here is what I believe, and this is what I know from personal experience. You will never know how much inner strength and resilience is inside of you until you are facing something that you have to overcome. For sure. As you guys know, I had some very serious health issues these past 4 years. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the 4 years that I would have to lay down flat for 4 years, I would have gone nuts. I probably would have gone crazy, and I probably would have told you that there's no way I can do that. There's no way anybody can do that, and I probably would have lost hope. Luckily, I didn't know then that it would last for 4 years, and I know now that in fact I had within me the inner strength and the resilience to not go mad, not go bitter, and come out the other side just grateful. And okay, the point isn't just to be resilient. The point is that to be resilient and grow as well as you're going through something difficult. It's both and. And I can say that that's true for me. That I've come out extremely grateful, and part of that was you guys. You guys have supported me in ways I never expected, ever. I didn't. In fact, there were times when I was worried that the support would stop, and it never, ever did, because that's not who you are, and that's good. Because that is the beloved community. That is the community that we need to sustain us, to help us, and to give us the courage to make ourselves vulnerable, and thus create relationships that are meaningful, that are fulfilling and sustaining. The Buddha said, and I'm paraphrasing, that only you can walk your path. You, only you. And there's nobody can take it away, the burden that you carry. Nobody can take it for you, walk it for you, and then give it back to you when you're strong. That's not how it works. You have to walk it. And you have to be compassionate, kind, and loving to yourself. And only you can be that. Because Eric can be compassionate to me all he wants. If I am not to myself, I can't allow that in. If I'm not loving to myself, Eric can love on me all he wants. I will never truly experience that. Only we can do that. And then it's vulnerability. Be not afraid to make yourself vulnerable. In fact, seek it. Try it out. Have the courage to make yourself vulnerable. Now, if I were to make you really uncomfortable, I would have you turn to somebody you did not come to church with and ask you to share something that you're ashamed of, that you feel horrible or sad about, and make yourself vulnerable. Because that is the way to true connection. It is not the showing off, it's not the sharing of the successes. Sure, there's a place for that too. But for true heart-to-heart connection that we all desire, vulnerability is the way. Vulnerability is the way. And then, I don't know what is it that you're going through right now. There's more strength in you than you would have ever known. There's more resilience in you than you ever would have guessed. You got it. You got it. And then, find yourself a community. Remember the agrarian community. Isolated individuals are 20 times more likely to choose the final solution to their problems. The most extreme solution we humans can think of. Suicide. Find yourself a community and then live into that community. all the time. Don't just feed that horse at the bottom of the mountain, feed it all the time. Live into this community. And sometimes that means giving, and sometimes that means receiving, and make both of them equally okay with yourself. Equally okay with yourself, giving and receiving. In this culture, we so much prefer giving over receiving, and that too is a lack of vulnerability, a lack of willingness to become vulnerable. Receiving is vulnerability. Have the courage to receive. So, you got this. Find yourself a community, whether it's this one or another, it doesn't matter. Just find yourself a community, root yourself into that community, participate, both giving and receiving. Have the courage to be vulnerable, to make yourself vulnerable. And wherever you can, and find the opportunity, teach yourself emotional intelligence. Be not afraid of your thoughts, but sit with them or else they'll haunt you. Open those doors in your mansion. Let the light in. Let the air in. It's not nearly as scary as you think it is. And so it is.